Hey guys, it's David from Gigi's Fabric Shop, Juki Junkies, and Janome Junkies, and in today's video, I'm going to show you a little bit about the Juki LS1341 cylinder arm machine. I'm extremely excited to give you all the basic information on the LS1341, along with how to wind the bobbin and thread the machine, and we're going to even show you how to oil this machine. So that way, if you're looking into purchasing this machine, or if you already have it, you can refer back to this video so you can be well versed on how to set up your machine to get started sewing. So we're going to categorize it in that order, and we're going to put timestamps in this video so you can kind of just look down below and you'll be able to see little timestamps. So if you want to skip to the oiling part or the threading part or just the basic info, you can do that so you don't have to watch the full video, or you can just watch the full video and we appreciate it. Starting off with the basic information, the LS1341, as you can tell, is a cylinder arm machine. So it has that free arm that sticks out, and you're able to fit hats and backpacks and bags and all sorts of different things in this area. And this is set up on a space saver table. So whenever you look at this machine on Juki Junkies, you'll see that there's two different options. You can get the space saver table, which is what we have here, or you can get the standard table, which we'll throw up a picture here, and you can kind of just choose what you like. I personally kind of like the space saver table because if you're wanting a cylinder arm machine, you're going to most likely want to throw some crazy objects over here and you're going to need all that extra space. And if you get a standard table, you can imagine there's only going to be about 4 inches to 5 inches below that cylinder arm for you to throw objects underneath there. I'm going to also throw up a picture of a customer who bought the 1341 who wanted to buy one machine so she could have a flatbed and a cylinder arm. And to do so, you just have to add a flatbed attachment to this machine so you can actually use this as a flatbed as well. So I'll throw up a picture here and you'll be able to kind of see what it looks like. It just screws into this throat space mount right here, and then it's just a flatbed. It's not made by Juki. It's an aftermarket part that somebody makes, I believe, on Etsy. You can just kind of Google flatbed attachment for a 1341. You'll find it. We don't carry it, but there is that out there, so that's really cool if you wanted to. If you're looking for your first industrial and you want a cylinder arm, but you also need a flatbed, that is an option with this machine. Now, if you start looking at the machine, you'll actually notice that if you just don't look at the cylinder arm part, it actually looks very similar to the 1541S. And that's because this machine is very similar to the 1541S. It's a needle feed walking foot machine. So the needle is actually moving like this and helping pull that fabric through and feed the fabric. But you also have the feed dogs and the upper foot and the inner foot moving as well, giving you that triple feed walking foot system. So you have 3 things moving it on the top. You have the needle, inner foot, and outer foot that are all helping move that fabric. So feeding multiple layers and thick layers is super, super easy on this machine. You also have 16 millimeters of height when you lift up this foot. So as you can see, when I lift up this foot here, this on the space saver table, the knee lift lever is actually going to be this pedal right here. And when you push down on it, you'll see that the foot will lift up. So if you don't get the space saver table option, you're going to actually have a knee lift lever in the front of this machine, which if I have a picture, I'll throw it up. And pretty much the knee lift lever is just going to come out the front right here, just like your 1541S would, and you would just use your knee to lift it up. But on the space saver table, you have the option of the foot pedal, which I think is really, really cool, or you have the option of still using that knee lift lever if you prefer that method. With this machine here, you have a variety of different mounting options for seam gauges, whether you have one in the throat space area or a drop down seam gauge. So you can see this is a drop down here. So you can just flip it up when you're not using it and flip it right back down when you want to use it. This has a little roller foot edge or roller edge. You can also get a flat guide here. We do carry these on our website, so you can buy one of these drop down seam gauges on jukijunkies.com. I'll also put a link in the description if you're interested in one of these. They work on almost all the industrials. So if you have a 1541S, a 1341, and a variety of other models, you can kind of just check what model it fits in the description of the post. So this machine fits a 135 by 17 needle system, and you can go all the way down to an 18 needle, all the way up to a size 24 needle. Now, timed from the factory, you're going to be wanting to use 19 to 23 for the needle size range, but you can, if you're handy, you can retime the machine, or if you have a technician, they can retime the machine so you can use the smaller size 18 and a bigger size 24. Now, as far as the feet that fit on this machine, it's going to be very similar to the 1541S feet, since there's the inner and the outer foot. So you can shop a variety of those aftermarket feet on JukiJunkies.com or a variety of other websites. The next question is, what kind of thread does this machine take? You can use a Tex 45 thread all the way up to a Tex 138 thread. So you can use a variety of thicknesses of industrial thread, and you will not have issues with your thread popping out when you're using that Tex 138 on your top stitching for sure. The next question you might be wondering is, what kind of motor does this take? It's going to take a standard servo motor. You can either get the needle positioner motor or the standard motor. I highly recommend the needle positioner motor because personally I think it's really nice to have your needle always end up or always end down, along with the fact that I think the needle positioner motor, you can kind of get it to go much slower. And when you're using a cylinder arm machine, you're going to want to sew pretty slow, especially when you're doing, intricate designs and stitches on the edges of bags. So you're going to want to go pretty slow. So I would highly recommend getting the needle positioner motor. As you can see, this machine here actually has a bobbin case that loads from the top, kind of similar to the computerized machines in the Juki industry for the home sewing machines like the DX7, DX4000, all of those models. You actually have a bobbin case that drops in on the top of the machine, and so does the bobbin, of course, if your bobbin case is going up here. So you'll see the bobbin case and the bobbin drops right in on the top of that machine, and you can also see that the bobbin case is pretty dang cool looking. It's like a half of a normal bobbin case, and we'll kind of show you how that works more once we get to the threading and winding the bobbin and how you insert the bobbin into the bobbin case. Unlike the 1541S, the 1341 doesn't have a oil reservoir, so there's not like a spot you actually fill up with oil and it self-lubricates different components of the machine. You're gonna have to actually manually oil this machine on your own. And with that being said, you might be wondering, oh man, I have to oil this super cool machine on my own? Well, quite honestly, if you're using it for home sewing use, you're not really in a factory where you're sewing all the time, you really don't need to oil this machine every time you sew. Maybe once every 2 months if you're sewing 1 hour a week or a couple hours a week here and there. But if you're doing it maybe 4 to 5 hours a day, then you'd probably want to oil it once a week. It also matters based on how fast you're sewing. So if you're running this machine really, really fast all the time and you're really knocking out things, then you're going to want to oil your machine more. If you're not running it very fast, you're just going really slow and you're only sewing a few hours a week, then once every month or two is really all you're going to need. And you can also kind of just do a visual inspection once we get to the lubrication part where you can kind of see when you need to add more oil. So we'll kind of show you that oiling stuff here a little bit later, but that was just something I wanted to note. There's no oil reservoir or pump on this machine, so it's not self-lubricating. You're going to be oiling it on your own. Now, before we get into threading and winding the bobbin, I wanted to go over just how solid this machine is. When I was setting up this machine, I was amazed at how just beefy it is. I mean, this thing is like, I was at a friend's house the other day and I was working on his car engine, and it's like the engine block of a car is just solid. It's just super heavy and just, it's going to be around forever. You can fix it and rebuild it and all that kind of stuff. And when I look at the Juki industrial sewing machines, it kind of reminds me of an engine block. I mean, it's solid as can be. And when you look at all of like the metal cuts and the threading, you can tell that this is serious quality. So when you buy a Juki industrial sewing machine, you're buying, really what people are copying out there in the industry. When you see all of these different cylinder arm clones of the Juki, really Juki is the standard, and these things last you a lifetime. And I mean it when I say a lifetime. You'll see industrial Juki sewing machines that have been around for decades and decades, and they hold their value really, really good. So if you're ever looking on the used market, you'll see that they're selling for pretty much the same price as a new machine, especially even after being used hundreds of hours. So when you're buying an industrial machine, just know it is quite an investment, and it's going to be something that's going to be around for your grandkids. Now, one thing I wanted to note for all the people out there that maybe aren't too familiar with industrial Juki sewing machines is the motor is separate. So you have the head of the machine, and then you have the motor of the machine underneath the table. And that motor is pretty much just, a servo motor, or you can get one with a needle positioner or non-needle positioner, which I was talking about earlier. And there's this pulley on it, and that pulley is what spins, and then you have this big drive belt. So on this machine, I believe it's like a size 56 drive belt is how many inches it is. So it's a big old belt, and it goes from the pulley on the motor up to this hand wheel, and that's what actually gives the machine power. So there's no electronic components on this machine, and that's what really makes it super timeless, because, I mean, in 100 years from now, all you need is still just a belt to get this hand wheel to spin super fast. And quite honestly, you could run this machine without a motor by just rotating the hand wheel, or you could have your kid just spinning the hand wheel really quick, and there you go, you got a motor. But I think that's really cool to note because the machine is so timeless, because also the motor is just replaceable, and the motor is only a few $100s. So the motor takes a crap, or your motor gets struck by lightning or something, or it blows up, or whatever could happen to it, you can just replace the motor in a few years and you're back up and running. In fact, whenever these machines come into our shop sometimes for maybe a timing issue or something like that, actually I've never had a 1341 come into the shop, but we've had like 8700s, very similar to this machine as far as how they run for the power. We can literally just hook up a pulley to this hand wheel and use a drill with a pulley attached to it to drive the machine if we don't have the exact table and motor set up here for that machine. So what I'm trying to say is the motor is completely separated from the machine itself, and it's just a replaceable part, and it's pretty cheap. So that's really cool to think about. Now, a few other basic functions I want to go over is this machine's stitch length goes from 0 all the way up to 6 millimeters. And as far as the bobbin winding goes, the bobbin winder is actually built into the machine. So you can see this is the bobbin winder. You're going to throw a bobbin on there. We're going to go over that more here in a few minutes, but that's really cool. You can wind a bobbin while you're sewing, so you're just constantly winding bobbins as you're sewing, so you always have one ready. And then of course, as you can see, we have a whole bunch of different tension adjustments over here. We have 1, 2, 3 little adjustments for tension. And then as far as threading the machine, it's not too bad. You do also have a little cutter right here. Of course, this is your reverse lever. So while you're sewing, you can just hold this down as you're sewing and it's going to start reversing, or let go of it. Also, a quick little fact, whenever you're doing your stitch length, you'll see your stitch lever moves a little bit. And if it's ever really tough to adjust your stitch length, pushing down the stitch lever a little bit really helps it spin a lot easier. So that's a little sewing machine hack for our industrials. Whoa, remember, we are JukiJunkies.com, where we have almost everything Juki on there, along with tons of fabrics, threads, needles, notions, bobbins, accessories, you name it, we've got it. Check out JukiJunkies.com. We are a small family-owned business just outside of Tampa, Florida, and we take a lot of pride in our customer support and service. So if you have any questions on Juki products or accessories, give us a call or shoot us an email, and we'll be happy to help you out. And not to mention, our shipping department is killing it. They ship super, super fast. So if you're looking for anything on JukiJunkies.com, we are going to ship it out in lightning speed. So try it out and let me know how it goes. So now let's set up your machine for winding a bobbin. And if you have a 1541S, this is actually going to be very similar to the 1541 because it's pretty much the same exact threading path. So you're just going to put your spool onto your anti-vibration cone and onto your spool holder here. Once you get it there, you're going to run your thread through the little thread guide on the spool stand. And now if you're winding a bobbin and you're actually not sewing at the same time, you can, obviously put it on this spool holder, but if you're wanting to thread your machine and wind a bobbin separately, you're going to want to put your winding bobbin spool on the right side and then your actual spool of thread for sewing on the left side. But in this instance, we're not going to actually sew and wind a bobbin, so I'm going to have it on the left side. So we have that on the spool stand. We have our thread going back to front. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to front through this thread guide here, and then we're going to also go right back again and go back to front again. And this is just a little extra step of tension. Now we're going to go through this little thread guide here from back to front, going right to left when looking at the front of the machine around this little tension disc. And then we're going to go back through that hole one more time, and that is going to give us just an extra step of tension. So now that we have that in there, I'm going to go ahead and give mine a clean cut on the front. And all you're going to do is you're going to grab your 1541, 1341 size bobbin. I believe it's like an M size bobbin. We have these on our website in packs of 3. We'll put a link in the description. You're going to put your thread through the hole of the bobbin, just like so. Pushing it onto this bobbin winder. Should be nice and tight, just like that. And once you get that there, you can go ahead and engage your bobbin winding mode. And once you engage that, you can actually just hit the pedal and it'll start spinning. But since we're not actually sewing while we wind our bobbin, I'm going to make sure my bobbin case is out, my bobbin thread is out, and I'm going to also make sure my needle is not threaded and that my thread is not completely in the needle or in that take-up lever, because that's going to be moving. And then I also want to make sure that my foot is lifted all the way up, and I'll use the lever on the back to keep it up. So that way my feed dogs are not rubbing against my foot and wearing those down. So now that I have my machine unthreaded, my foot lifted up, and I have my machine ready to wind the bobbin, I'm just going to go ahead and hold down the gas pedal, and we'll go ahead and wind our bobbin. So as you can see, my needle positioner motor is set on a very low speed. So I'll go ahead and change that setting real quick so that way we can wind this much faster. So I just changed my speed. So I'm just going to wind it about that far because I don't need any more. And once I get it wound around quite a few winds, I can actually go ahead and cut this thread here, just level with the bobbin, and then I can continue to wind. And whenever I'm done winding, this will actually just disengage on its own. And if it's disengaging too soon, you can just loosen this flathead here. And by doing so, you can move this little lever back a little bit more, and that'll allow you to wind more on your bobbin. And then if you want less, then you would just do the opposite. You would loosen this and push this lever down. I'm just gonna actually wind the whole thing. That way you guys can see it disengaging. So now, as you can see, it just disengaged on its own. So now we have a full bobbin, and my setting is perfect because you can see that my bobbin is actually pretty dang full, but it's not overly full, so we're good to go. Now when you're done, there is a little snip right here you can use to cut your bobbin thread, so that way you don't have to bring an extra pair of scissors with you. You can just snip it right there. Now remember, when winding your bobbin, it's important to inspect it before inserting it into the bobbin case. You're looking to make sure it's not super squishy. So as you can see, when I squish it, it's nice and tight. And if it was super squishy, that means that your thread came out of your tension disc, or it wasn't properly threaded in the tension disc. And if it is squishy and everything looks good, you can always increase the tension so that way it gives it a little bit tighter wind onto the bobbin. And doing so, you would just turn this to the right, increasing the tension on this tension disc. And if you need to loosen it a little bit, turn it to the left, and that would be loosening it. So now that I have my bobbin wound, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to insert the bobbin into the bobbin case and put it into the machine. And then we're going to start with threading the machine. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab this super cool looking bobbin case. You're going to put your bobbin thread falling down on the right side, making a 9. This pretty much applies to all sewing machines. Then you're just going to have that excess tail fall into that little groove right there. And then you're going to pull it underneath that tension spring. So you can see this is your tension spring. And to tighten your bobbin tension, you're going to be tightening this flathead here, not this one. So you'll just lefty-loosey, righty-tighty this recessed flathead right here. So we don't need to do that. But once you get that underneath that little black tension spring, you'll see that there's a small little groove / slot that it just kind of falls into right there. And you also see it right there. There's like a little groove. Your thread will just kind of sit right there. Then you're going to open this little window on the machine. You're going to open this little lever here so you can put your bobbin case in. And make sure your foot is away from the pedal so you don't start sewing. Make sure your thread is in the right spot. And you'll just go ahead and insert it all like that. Your bobbin case should line up just like this so that your thread is just coming out of that little groove that I showed you earlier. And once you have all that done, then you can go ahead and push this down. I'm going to snip the tail end of this thread so it's about 1 to 2 inches like that. And then I'll just tuck it back here, and I'll go ahead and close this little door. So now let's get ready to thread this machine. You're going to put your spool onto your anti-vibration cone if you have one of these big spools. That anti-vibration cone helps it from moving around while you're sewing. So what you're going to do is you're going to put that on that little spool stand. Now remember, if you're winding a bobbin, you'll have that on this side while you're sewing, and if your main sewing thread should be always on that left side. So now we're going to go from back to front through that guide, and you're going to find this next thread guide, and you're just going to, well, let's give this a clean little edge. You're just going to go from the top to bottom, and we're just going to go through 2 of these holes since this is actually a Tex 90 thread here, so we don't really need all that much more tension. Now if you're sewing and you're seeing that you need more upper tension, you can always go through more of these thread guides. So instead of going through 2, you could go through 3 or 4 or all 5, depending on how heavy the thread is you're using. So the heavier the thread, the more you're going to most likely want to go through here. But in this instance, we're just going to go through 2. Then we're going to come down here to this thread guide. You're going to go from back to front through this thread guide. Then you're going to go around this small little tension disc here from right to left going down. Then you're going to go around this main tension disc here going from right to left. Then you're going to, and when I'm threading this machine, notice that I'm using my upper hand, my right hand up here, holding this thread to give me tension. What that does is it allows me to seat this thread nice and deep into these tension discs so I know that it's seated in there properly. Also, always make sure the thread is sitting in between the two cymbal-like tension discs. They kind of look like cymbals if you ever in band. You want to make sure they're in between those tension discs and not behind them, because if it's behind it, there's not going to be any tension and you're going to have some issues. So make sure it's seated deep and in those tension discs. And on this one, you're going to go from right to left, just like this. And then you're going to go back up and you're going to go around this tension disc. And on this tension disc, right to left again, but you're going to come back down and you're going to go around this little thread guide and you're going to pull it until it clicks. And what it's clicking over, as you can see through this little window, there is a little metal piece and it's got to click over that metal piece, and then this little take-up spring, when you pull up on it, you'll see it should move up like that. You're going to go through this thread guide here from the bottom to the top, and then you're going to feed it through this take-up lever. You're going to go right to left in the take-up lever. Then you're going to go into this thread guide here, just like that. Then you're going to go into this thread guide from the top down. And when you do that, it's going to go behind this little spring thread guide, and then it's going to go into this thread guide here, which I'm going to actually use my Timmi tweezers, which we sell on JukiJunkies.com, and we actually produce these. These are our own brand. Sewciopath is the brand name, and these are really, really nice tweezers that work great. So now that we have it through all these thread guides here, we're going to go through the thread guide on the needle bar, back to front here. And then once we have it there, we can go ahead and lower our foot. So I'm threading this machine with the foot up, but quite honestly, you can thread it with the foot down as well. As long as you're flossing, you're going to make it deep into those tension discs and you won't have any issues with your tension. So now you're going to go left to right through the needle hole, and the bright side is this thicker thread goes really nice through the needles. So now that we have our machine threaded, our bobbin inserted, we can go ahead and lift up our foot and turn that hand wheel nice and slow. And then what I like to do is grab that thread coming out of that needle on the right side, and I'll just hold that up here and I'll rotate my hand wheel towards me. And once I feel that take-up lever go to the top, you'll see your thread from the bobbin come up, and then I'll go ahead and grab that and pull that to the back. So now that we have the machine all threaded, we're going to go ahead and just do a quick little sample sew out on the piece of material that they actually sent us from the factory, showing the stitch quality that we got the machine with. Really just a test sample. Let's turn that stitch length up a little bit. And you can see with my needle positioner, it's making my needle always end down versus ending up. So I have it set where it always ends down. So it's really nice when I'm working and pivoting. You can see whenever I stop, it always ends down. And the other cool thing is you can make it where it always ends up as well if that's what you prefer. So we're going to go ahead and lift up my needle. And I have the speed really high on the motor right now, so I'm going to turn that down so I don't sew my finger off. But go ahead and snip up these threads, and you can go ahead and look at the stitch quality we have here. This machine is amazing. Okay, so we're going to start on the top of this machine, and I'm just going to oil everything that needs to be oiled on the top of the machine. So this whole cover here actually can come off, and you can see that there's oil wicks underneath here that you can drop oil on periodically, but you don't really need to do that all that often. I would say after a long time of it sitting, then you can take that top cover off. It's just these 6 screws, and then you'll access more oil wicks where you could add oil. But the first thing you're going to want to do is, this is kind of like a little oil tank, it says in the user manual. You can add an adequate amount of oil here so that way that wick looks like it's got oil on it, and you're going to do that once a week or once every few months if you're not using the machine, kind of just depending on how often you're sewing. And then you're going to add oil to all the little red spots that are marked with red. You can just add like one little drop in there. Remember, you can't over oil this machine since there's no electronic components or motor actually inside of the head of this machine. Nothing's going to be hurt. You're just going to have excess oil dripping onto your materials. So just be very cautious of how much oil you're putting on the areas once we get down here to the free arm. So now that we have this top area oiled, what we're going to do here is we're going to open up this side plate. There's a small Phillip head screw right here. Once you get that unscrewed, you can open this up, and you'll see a variety of different wicks and oil wicks, and all of mine look really well lubricated, but if they're not well lubricated, they look a little dry, then you can go ahead and add a little bit of oil. Whoa, a little too much. But just add 1 or 2 little drops on there if they look like they're dry. Mine's already kind of got oil, so I'm not going to do too much, but this is a brand new machine, so I am adding just a little bit just to make sure it's all happy and ready to go. So you're just going to add some oil to these wicks. There's actually one little wick right here I can see poking up. Literally anywhere you see a wick, like an oil wick, that's what holds oil. You want to drop a little drop of oil on that. There's not an exact time frame of oiling on these industrial machines. It really depends on how much you're using it. If you're using it every single day, then you need to be checking these oil spots probably at the beginning of the day to make sure that you're oiling it properly. And I'm actually going to throw up a picture of all of the oiling spots from the user manual up on the screen, and you can just pause the video and look at where they're telling you to oil it. And I'm also going to throw up what they say as far as how often you should oil the certain areas, so that way you can make sure you're oiling it in spec to the manual. Right here is another like oil reservoir slash kind of like big swab that you're going to add oil to, very similar to the top window up here. You're going to want to do this not as often, but maybe once a week, and then the other little spots are going to be more frequently. So we're going to add 1 drop of oil to this little red dot, 1 or 2 drops of oil there. Now again, my machine's brand new, so I'm adding a little bit more, even though it probably doesn't need it, but I just want to be sure of it. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. And then of course right here you have the hook of the machine. This is the hook, the point of this, and then this is the basket, the part that the bobbin case sits into. And you can see when you rotate this, there is little screws here, and there's this little tiny hole on this hook part, or the part that rotates. You can drop a little oil in there, or you could actually just drop it right on the ledge right there. So you can see the hook is going around that basket, and that's metal on metal. And that way when the hook is rotating around that basket, it's getting well lubricated. So you can actually see the little opening right in front of the hook is where you can actually access the basket, and that's where you're going to be dropping it right there on that little ledge. Apply some oil right here, just a little bit there, right here. There's actually one other hole on the back side of this free arm. You're going to drop a little drop of oil right there. One thing I wanted to mention is what type of oil this machine comes with. It's a Juki #2 oil. Now any oil 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all those numbers are close enough in viscosity to work on this machine. So as long as it's Juki lubrication or really any sewing machine oil. What I like to use is this little oiling dropper. You can just fill it up and you can control how much oil, or you can purchase a Juki oiling pen on our website, which we'll throw a picture of that, and that kind of allows you to apply the oil a little bit more. So now that we've oiled the machine and we've shown you what the user manual also tells you, you can push this lever over. I just want to show you a little secret here if you don't have this machine. And you can tilt this machine back. Now you may have to take off your knee lift lever bar on the back of the machine to do this, but once you get that taken off, you can tilt this machine back, and it rests on this big peg back there, and you'll see there's a wick here, and that wick right there will actually just allow some of the excess oil that falls down in this area here from all the oiling spots up there to drain down into this little area here. And then it'll fall into your little catch can on the bottom of the machine. So if you're wondering where that oil is coming from, it's coming from in here. So now that we have that machine tilted back, we've shown you that little area, you might as well take a quick little look at how amazing the components are on this machine. Just look at how robust and strong all those metal parts are there. And we can go ahead and tilt the machine back. Now this machine's not light, so make sure that you have somebody that is capable of lifting it up and moving it forward. Once you get it moved forward, you're just going to go ahead and move that little metal latch there and tighten it back down. Well, just like that, we now know all the basic information on the LS1341 industrial cylinder arm sewing machine, and we now know how to wind a bobbin, thread the machine, and oil the machine. And if you're in the area, Tampa, Florida, Brandon, Florida, look up Gigi's Fabric Shop and stop on in. We'll be happy to show you this machine in person. And just like that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe down below, comment down below if you have any questions or comment something you learned new on this machine, and give us a like because that really motivates us to make more videos just like this for you guys back at home. We post every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time.